Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's Jump for Joy, On the Beach, Mom Plus Me, Butterfly Kisses, Critters in the Burbs, and the Reveal Wheel Spring Sentiment. So this is a lot of different sets combined onto one little card today. I've stamped out the images I'll be using on neenah Solar White cardstock with Lawn Fawn's Jet Black ink, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers. For the foxes, I'm going to use YR12, YR14, and YR18, and I'll be coloring them pretty much the same. So I'm just going to do the one on screen. I'm using the YR18 for my shadow, and just laying that in mostly along the back of the body and just anywhere that the sun wouldn't hit, and then blending out with the YR14, and then I'll save the majority of that space for the YR12 so I get a nice bright highlight. And I did decide to do the tail separately just so I could work quickly with these marker colors. So I'll go back and do the tail right now. And I'm going to put that shadow real close to the body this time because that would be where the sun would be hitting it the least. And then as the tail goes up, I will add in that YR14 and then the YR12. I am going to do a second layer on all of the foxes. This is something that I almost always do. I just really like how it makes the colors that much more saturated, and it really does help to smooth out your blends. So I just quickly go back over the colors that I've already laid in. And when I get to my lightest shade, I don't take it all the way to the line. I just kind of go a little bit before it so that there's a little bit of space that only has that one layer. For the whites of the foxes, I'm going to use YR000 to add just a little bit of shading into those spaces so that they still look nice and white. But I thought the orange tone would go better with the rest of them rather than a gray. It's just something a little different. And I did add a rosy cheek to the mama fox with RV10 and colored in the ears as well. For the tree trunk, I'm using E53, E55, and E57. The first thing I did was color in the tree trunk solid with the E53. Then I'm going to bring in the E55 and do just a real quick little bit of shading there, nothing too intense. And then I'm going to go straight into my E57 and start to draw in some wood grain texture. So I'm just doing little swirls and lines and just adding, some detail to that wood so that it has a little bit more personality. Real quick and simple, and then I will color over that completely again with the E53 just to knock that back and integrate it more into the wood. For the treetop, I'm using YG11, YG13, and YG17. The first thing I'm going to do is just color that entire area with a coat of the YG11. Nothing real precise. I'm just kind of scribbling the color on and getting it down, getting that paper saturated so that I can get a nice blend on that large area. Then I'm going to come in with the YG13 and begin to add some of that in to the bottom area of the tree so it has a nice little shadow there. And then I'll also do a few little swirls in the middle to maybe indicate some clusters of leaves. And then finally I'll come in with the YG17 and I'm going to darken that up a bit. Now, normally I do color darkest to lightest, except for when it is a large area. The undercoat of the lightest color just helps with the saturation. It kind of gets the paper wet so that the markers can start to move and blend. And also these three markers are pretty new to me, so I'm not 100% sure how they work together. So whenever I use like a new combination, I just like to use a little caution by building up the color lightest to darkest. With colors that I'm familiar with, I just normally go straight to the darkest because I know how they work together just because I use them so often. So after I had everything blended out, I just hadn't reached the level of contrast that I normally like in my coloring. I felt like the treetop was a little pale in comparison to the coloring on the foxes. So I added in another new to me shade, which is G46. And I really like how these four colors played together. I think they work really nice, and I think this is going to be a new go-to for me for this kind of brighter green that still has some depth and intensity to it. So I just went right back over the shadows that I'd already laid in with that G46, and then I started to blend it out in the reverse. So I used the YG17 and then the YG13, and then finally went over the lightest areas with the YG11. And then finally for the butterflies, I decided to use yellow. So I'm using Y11, Y13, and Y15. So this is going to be a welcome baby card, and I wanted to keep it super gender neutral. So it could work for those instances where the couple might be waiting to find out the gender, or if you just want to have like a stash of baby cards on hand and you want to make them before the gender reveal announcement has been given. I think this just works for any of those occasions. So I trimmed those out with the matching dies, and then I also trimmed out a piece of Bristol Smooth Surface with the Lawn Fawn Meadow Backdrops Landscape. And I'm going to leave that whole die cut together and use the Cloudy stencil to sponge on some tumbled glass Distress Oxide ink. And I'm going right over the frame with that ink as well because I want the whole thing to be like one picture. So I'm going right up to that stitched edge. Then I'm going to turn my stencil so I get a different cloud figuration and continue blending down the panel. Now this does have a few little grasses and things that are sticking up into the area. So I'm going to pick one of these stencil formations. I even had to flip the stencil upside down so that it covers those up. So I'm not going to accidentally get any of the blue ink on those grassy pieces. And then to add a little bit of blue tone to the cloud base at the bottom, I'm just going to carefully use the edge of my sponge dauber and just brush on a little bit using the ink that was already on the sponge. Then I tapped a little bit of ink onto my work surface. I'm going to cover up the grass with that stencil, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to that so I can do some splatter detail just to add some fun movement in the sky and give it a little bit of a extra personality there. Then I can pop the sky portion out carefully without smearing any of those wet dots. This little piece didn't want to give, but finally it came out. So I'll set that aside to make it easier to do the grassy border. So I'm starting with Twisted Citron for that, and I'm just going to do an entire coat of this. So I'm going right up to the edge where that grass ends on the frame and just blending that color all across the grasses. And then I'm going to take Mowed Lawn just so I have something a little bit darker, and I'm going to sponge that from the top edge, again using just the side of that dauber when necessary so that I don't get, too much ink where I don't want it. Then I'm going to open up that second grassy hillside and insert a piece of cardstock into there so that I can also blend a little bit of that mowed lawn on the top of that grass border without getting it on the panel underneath where I don't want that color. Once I have the mowed lawn on there where I want it, I'm going to go back to my Twisted Citron dauber and just blend the transition between those two areas and make it nice and smooth. Then I will tap a little bit of that mowed lawn onto my work surface and water that down as well so I can do a little more splatter detail on the bottom part of the card so that the entire scene will match. Then I will set this panel aside until it has dried completely. Once it has, I'm going to put the pieces back together and pop it into my MISTI. And I am stamping out my sentiment using Lawn Fawn's black licorice ink. It's nice and bold. It gives you a really crisp sentiment. So I'm using the words from the reveal wheel set that I showed at the beginning to spell out congrats on your bundle of joy. I also want to do some stamping on the inside of my card, so I will pop my card base in my MISTI next, and I'm using Lawn Fawn's sticky note cardstock. So here you could later stamp it's a boy or it's a girl if you wanted to kind of wait to add that. I'm going to keep this gender neutral, so I'm stamping out excited to meet your little one, and then I'm using the little fox mom and baby from Mom Plus Me. And I'm doing that with Lawn Fawn's sunflower ink. So now I'm ready to assemble my card. So I'm adding some liquid glue to the back of that panel, and you need to do it both on the frame and on the piece that pops out so everything is nice and secure. Now if you're going to tuck any images down into those grassy hills, you want to make sure not to put glue right behind those. You want to leave a little bit of space so that you can tuck some images down inside. The only image that I think I ended up sticking down inside was my tree trunk. So I'm going to work with that first while that glue is still wet and just tuck that down inside that first hill. I wanted the top of the tree to overlap the border of that frame just a little bit to pull the whole scene together. So I just adjusted that till I was happy with it, and then I added the daddy fox kind of coming in on the left hand side. So he's coming to join the mom and baby, and I'm putting the mom kind of laying down on that grassy border, and then I'm going to add the baby so it's sitting on her tummy. So they're out there playing in the meadow, and the dad's kind of coming home from his day and ready to join them for some family fun. The last thing that I have to add to the little scene is the butterflies. It's just going to add a little extra pop of color and give it a little more whimsy and some more movement. So I thought it was fun to add those. So it just makes it just a cheerful, happy scene, which is fitting for a new baby. And that is going to complete my card for today. I'll lift that up and give you guys another peek at the inside. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would love your support. It's a great way to show your support, especially during times like these. And if you want to make sure that my videos always end up in your feed, go ahead and ring that notification bell. If you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought might also interest you. You can click on either one of those to check them out. As always, I hope you guys are having an amazing day. Bye-bye.